Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel entitled The State of Startup and the Future of Gen AI. My name is James Lee. I'm the General Manager for Google Cloud Startup and AI Business. So very, very delighted to have all of you here. This is a very, very timely topic as we're arguably going through one of the most significant evolutions in technology. Gen AI is certainly changing the way business is being done today, how we interact with our customers, with data, things that were not possible in the future. And now with the advance of Gen AI have now become possible, and we continue to see how companies are reinventing how things are done. And of course, startups is a category or a very key stakeholder in all of this. Many of you in the audience today are leading the charge when it comes to driving innovation, changing how things are being done. And to discuss this topic today, I'm very, very excited to welcome our four panelists. Thomas Kurian, who is the CEO of Google Cloud, Ravi Mahtre, who is the founding partner of Lightspeed Venture Partners, Sarah Wang, who's a general partner of Andreessen Horowitz, and Asheem Chandna, who is the partner of Greylock Partners. So welcome, panelists, and thank you for being here. So without further ado, I wanted to jump right in because we've got a lot of content to cover. So maybe I'll start with you, Thomas. You talk to a lot of different companies, large and small, right? You probably meet with some of the most promising startups in the world. Can you maybe just share with us some of the technologies or emerging trends that you're witnessing?
We're seeing enormous interest from the startup ecosystem, whether that is people working to build products that are consumer-facing or people building products that are enterprise-facing in using AI to redefine the category of product they're in. Because if you're not doing it, somebody else is. We as Google want to help the startup ecosystem. Today, 70% of all AI unicorns run on GCP, and 50% of all AI-funded startups run on GCP. And so what we're doing is taking every piece of the technology that we have. You can start by just saying, I need accelerators because I'm building my own models. Or you can say, no, I really want to build a product. I don't want to build a foundational model. I want to start with your models. And so we give you a platform to use our models. Or you can even build on top of the integrated experience we have called Duet. And there are lots of companies doing that. This morning, we talked about how Workday is doing that, for example. And there are many, many other companies doing it. Recognizing our startups, we give you access to our technical people so that they can answer questions and show you how to optimize the use of our models or of our platform. We provide you go-to-market help so that you can, as you build your product, we can help you in the market. And we really think it's a profound shift that's happening in the way that software products are being designed and built.
Thank you, Thomas. Ravi, maybe I'll just continue that question with you. Lightspeed is a VC that's known for, we like to say, seeing around the corners. You've been able to identify a lot of early trends, and recently I know you've also been, investing a lot in the gaming verticals. So maybe you can also share with us kind of what you're seeing in the market now in the startups community.
Yeah, I would echo what Thomas said. I think AI, and if you really, I'm sure all of you in the audience see it, it has a profound ability to disrupt the product experience in almost all technology categories. And if you're not thinking about how to use AI to meaningfully evolve what a product experience is, your competitors or some other bright person is. So that's an enormous opportunity for startups, and it's an enormous place where existing companies do need to see around corners. And one interesting thing, that we've noticed across, I think at this point Lightspeed probably has invested in maybe 30 or 40 companies recently in AI that are really focused on generative AI as the place that they want to disrupt. But that the if we think about it as the cost structure of a startup company, where if you were historically a software company, even if you were SaaS and running in the cloud, you would think about the money that you raised, what you needed to spend. At least 70% was on people, highly skilled software developers, product managers, et cetera. And there was a back end of the costs you need to spend on your cloud back end to run your software, both in test dev mode and then to deliver the experience to the customers. What we've seen with our AI companies consistently, it is a material shift because of the need to, whether it's training on the data or inferencing from data, whatever place you land in the stack, you need to think about the cost structure of your company probably being at least 50% up to 70% compute, data, networking, storage. And then that residual balance is a smaller set of exceptionally well-trained and highly educated people who know how to build the capability you're trying to offer. And the reason that's important, I think, well, one, I think Google has probably established itself. If that is going to be ultimately the cost structure of the business that you build, you want a partner who has, extreme expertise at scale and, the cost-effective ability, most cost-effective ability to deliver compute. And I think that's a place where I think the world is going to sort of ultimately see that Google is going to have a real distinctive advantage. So, that is one thing that we think about a lot, that this just structure of startup companies are going to look different, and you're going to have to think about really being a kind of compute factory in whatever it is the product that you deliver, if it's an AI product. So.
Thank you, Ravi. You talked about cost structure, right? So it's actually a nice segue into a question I have for you, Sarah, which is you recently co-authored an article about the economics of Gen AI and large language models. And in your article, which is a fascinating read, you talked about the fact that, hey, this generation of Gen AI is a little bit different from what we saw as AI in the past, right? And it's now arrived in a sense where it's sustainable, it's cost effective. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about kind of your view on that.
No, absolutely. And I think even just to first acknowledge, I think the premise implicit in your question is that AI has been around for decades. And I know a16z certainly is invested in it for over a decade. And I think we do believe that it's very, very different this time around, and a big part of that does center on the economics. But I think before we get into why that looks different this time around, I think actually the easiest way to summarize the difference is that the impact of AI in this time around in 9 short months has actually been broader than it has been in the last 20 years. The models that we're using today are not just helping us play Go at a supernatural level or slightly better predict our propensity to click on a banner ad. No offense, Google, that's great business. But really instead, creating, changing new user behaviors. And that's across art, design, games, medicine, coding, even the very core of human relationships and how you think about interacting with people, or AI, I should say, is really changing. And we think it's this broad nature of that impact that creates a really fertile ground for startups. And I think that broad nature of that impact segues nicely into the economic value, right? And I think we talk about the microchip bringing the marginal cost of compute to zero, the internet bringing the marginal cost of distribution to zero. And if you think about the businesses that were spawned from those two dynamics, we get very, very excited about generative AI bringing the marginal cost of creation to zero. And so with this wave of AI, we have seen a lot of more creative use cases taking off. It's sort of inherent in the word generative in the first place. But these are use cases where correctness may not be as important, right? They're not. It's not self-driving cars where you really need to get that nth degree of correctness, which is very, very costly and sort of supports the incumbent succeeding in endeavors such as that. But it's really areas where creativity is king. And the reason that ties to economic value is that creativity is actually often tied to white-collar roles, where the cost of the human is very expensive, right? And we, in our article that James referenced, we talk about a couple of examples. A basic one would be generating images, right? That costs a thousandth of a dollar and a second with AI to generate. And if you take a look at, I hope there's no graphic designers in the room, but having a graphic designer create an image in an hour and cost you at least $100, right? That's 100,000x difference in the cost of creation. And so if you think about what that means for startups, right? That is your opportunity, and that delta is very different this time. And then the third thing I'd just say is it's not just theory. What's really exciting about this wave is that there's actually proof in the pudding, right? Speed to adoption and then willingness to pay also has looked very different. At least I'm sure, for the VCs on this panel, all of us have seen companies get to an astounding number of users. You guys may have seen, on Twitter, sort of that time to get to 1 million users, right? With Netflix, that was 3.5 years. With Facebook, it dropped down to 10 months. ChatGPT, 5 days. And since then, I think a lot of startups have actually broken ChatGPT's record. And that pairing, I think, just makes this a really exciting time to be a startup founder.
Thank you, Sarah. Asheem, one of your colleagues at Greylock recently coined this phrase, AI or die, which is a little dramatic, but there's a lot of truth behind it. Right? I take it to mean that it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, large or small. If you don't have an AI strategy, specifically a Gen AI strategy, you're not going to survive in this new world. So to that point, maybe you can talk a little bit about which industries do you see or use cases are being most disruptive or being most disrupted or transformed in this age of AI?
Yeah, no, thanks. I would say, just fundamentally, just to echo what has already been said, and to add to that, I would say that fundamentally what AI, I think the promise is it can improve productivity, right? And improve productivity for white-collar workers, blue-collar workers, and I think the impact of this is going to be across industries. Just to take a couple of examples, so healthcare is a very large part of, the U.S. economy and of just a worldwide GDP. And you take something like healthcare and you look at what might lie ahead, right? AI can go across the life cycle, right? All the way from drug discovery to, clinical diagnosis, to ongoing care, to wellness. Or take another industry which many folks here can probably relate more closely to is just technology, and just take software, right? I think if you sit in this room 10 years from now, the way computer science is taught will likely be quite different from the way it's being taught today, and the role computers play in the way software is driven is going to be completely different. And and so in terms of what does it really mean to be a software engineer 5 or 10 years from now, and it's very likely the role of the software engineer is going to change, and people can be much more productive, right? Not just in writing software, but in software documentation, other things around software. Maybe just to talk functionally for a couple of moments, right? For most businesses, sales and marketing is a significant part of operating cost. And for most companies as they grow, one of the key ways a business gets operating leverage is they actually become more efficient in sales and marketing. And so if you look at something like AI and the promise it holds, right, just across sales and marketing, all the way from lead generation, the way lead generation is done. If you look at the way customers are curated, you look at SEO, the way it's done today, the way it may be done in the future. Look at things like A/B testing. Look at proactive outreach. And maybe just take one last functional piece, take customer support or customer operations, right? And again, look at the amount of money a business spends on that today across industries. And if you look at what may lie ahead, and again, how AI may be able to help, right, both customer agents to be more effective, and also in many cases, the AI itself, right, could be a level 1, level 2 agent. So I think what lies ahead, we're very, very early in this journey. And what really lies ahead is taking this technology and then bringing it to a variety of use cases. And in many cases, just driving productivity higher. And in other cases, things are going to be possible that were not possible, before.
Excellent. So we talk a little bit about kind of the macro trend and opportunities, right? I want to kind of bring it down a level to maybe something more micro, because I know many of our audiences today here are startup founders, and you're probably wondering, hey, like how do I capitalize on this wave of Gen AI, right? So Thomas, I wanted to come back to you, and if I'm a startup founder today, and I have all these like AI tools, models, like maybe I'm building my own model, or maybe I'm building on top of the model with use cases. How do I think about leveraging all these for my business?
Having worked with a number of startups, I think we suggest thinking about 3 dimensions. 1, what's the product you want to build? 2, how do you want to build it? 3rd, how do you take it to market? So what's the product you want to build? Today we showed how AI powers all of our products in cloud. Literally, we've woven AI into every single product to redefine the experience we have with it. And the way that we talk about it internally is, today when you think about, if you think about the complexity of the internet and what Google does, all of you use Google and you go and type search. Behind the scenes, we've taken all the complexity of the internet and simplified it so that you can type into a search box. You don't have to enter IP addresses and host names and routing information. Same thing, what we've done with our products is taken the sophistication of a language model and then put it behind an interface. So we showed you could chat with it and say, create an image and a slide deck. And we're always looking beyond where we are now to what's the eventual answer a person wants. So when we said, when you look at analytics, we're not just translating English into SQL, but we're actually doing the analysis. And we're saying not just what happened, but why it happened. And when we showed that you could actually create a slide deck out of it, we're narrating exactly what happened and why it happened so that you don't have to do all that work. So the first thing I would say is, think about if you had a domain in which you're building a product, how do you think about redefining what that domain would be if you had AI capability that really understood the domain? That's number 1. Number 2, as Ravi said, you need to change the way you think about how you build products. At Google, for example, we're using our model, our coding model, to do all tasks. And when we say all tasks, generating code, generating documentation, supervising check-ins. So at Google, you can't just check in code. You have to have a peer review of the code. Often the peer review are the experts, and there's only so many of them around, so people complain that they're waiting on the expert to check in their code. So we're training the model to actually supervise and find issues, like where are there security defects, etc. We're also working on something where there will never be a legacy code anymore. Meaning if a model can understand your code, it can always migrate the code. And so you never have a legacy system. And so the key is looking at what is the IP that you want to own with humans, and where can you use a system to hugely improve the productivity and pace with which you build products. That's number 2. Number 3, how do you run your company, and where do you focus on the value of AI changing the cost structure of your company? We've seen people use it in every function. Finance, to track, for example, which companies are going to pay you versus not, accounts payable. HR, most engineers say, I don't want to waste time writing a job post. Can you have it generate a job post for you? How can you help, train your marketing, sales, and most importantly, we have a huge number of people using it for customer service. And these systems can be spun up super quickly. When I say super quickly, just to give an example, Orange, which is a telecommunications company in France, stood up a customer service system, 2 engineers, 4 days. In the first week, it was answering 10,000 questions a day with 98% accuracy, which is far more. Imagine hiring the number of people, an average person, even if they did 6 calls a day, 6 calls in an hour, that's, if you multiply the math, that's an astonishingly large number of people. And so we think about what product you want to build, how do you want to build it, how do you want to take it to market, and where do you adjust the cost structure of your company so that you can spend more money perfecting the AI, which will be the basis of your product, while shifting other costs to make space for it.
Sarah, I wanted to maybe come to you next because I think one of the things that you talked about is a nice build-up from what Thomas talked about, is kind of building this defensible moat, right? So Thomas talked about how you leverage business model, technology, et cetera, to really build the business, right? I know we're still in the early innings of the Gen AI competition. Like, can you maybe talk a little bit about like what does it take to be ahead and stay ahead?
Yeah, I'll answer that question maybe in two ways, with the caveat that you mentioned, that the space is still very early, moats are evolving, and it also really depends on what type of business you're building. But the first way I'll answer it is actually maybe through the antithesis, which is what is not a moat of the companies that we've seen, and how have those even started to play out, even though the space is very early. The first one is thin wrappers built around GPT-4 or whichever model you've chosen. Those companies often get early success, maybe some first mover advantage, but the ease of which AI is making software development means that your competitors are coming much, much faster as well, and the differentiation is just incredibly low. And when I say thin, I mean you're really a spot solution, maybe one way of making copy editing a little bit easier, not to pick on any particular companies, but that's an area where we've seen a flood of companies look almost identical to each other. And when you don't own the model, you don't own too much of the workflow after you've gotten the customer in, that just has tended to be a bloodbath from a competitive standpoint. The second piece, and I say this actually because it's a good thing, I think, for startups, is that a lot of traditional moats are also eroding. So people always talk about system of record being the most venerated business model, right? High gross retention. You think about your Salesforces, your Workdays, your ServiceNows, but the data gravity that comes with being that type of business is also no longer a moat. Even, the snowflakes of the world, right? With AI, you can actually move data back and forth quite easily. And so I think that does create new opportunity for startups to come in. So that's probably a segue actually to what we have seen as signs of early moats. And so I'll talk about maybe two types of business models, again, very different. The first one is the vertically integrated full stack app. So that's where you build your own model, you own the app. So from soup to nuts, you're owning the full stack. This is not a business model for everyone, so I'll put that out there. That being said, the reason that we like it, and it's one of the reasons I invested in a company named Character.ai, is it does give you this level of control from building the model to collecting the data, and then being able to create that feedback loop where you're actually using your data to make your model better and your product better. And I think a little story that OpenAI once shared when, I think this was back in December before ChatGPT had come out, they mentioned that they wanted to use it to, it was sort of a, hey, let's get human feedback, right? We want people using this. It was sort of accidental that it actually exploded in the way it did. And I think just that anecdote in and of itself shows the power at which, hey, this data is rare, and how can we get it to actually make our underlying model better? That doesn't mean I think everyone in the room should go out and build their own model. I do think it sort of depends on the team that you have. And then, there's been a lot of talk about cost structure and why that's important, but this is a case where in my almost 15 years of investing, I think partnership with the folks at GCP has never been actually more important, and I was not paid to say that, but this is an area where there's tremendous capacity needs, and there's a lot of demand, and so making sure you can actually build the model that you're trying to is a competitive advantage. It's not a moat in and of itself, but it feeds into the moat that you build with a full stack app. The second type of business model, actually, maybe I'll take a quick poll. How many in this room are founders? Okay, and how many of you guys founded your businesses before 2023? Okay, great. So most of you. So this is actually maybe even more targeted at you guys. But I think where we get really excited is when companies who are building AI products actually do own the full workflow. And this is not by any means a new playbook, right? If you think about a company like Figma and what they did to product design. I remember calling their customers when we invested in Figma back in 2020 and hearing them say, I ripped out 10 pieces of software. All I need is Figma, right? And so what we really get excited about, and I think Thomas alluded to this in terms of getting into the domain and seeing how you can reimagine how that domain is really created top down, but are you reimagining the workflow for data science, for software development, whatever domain you've decided to found a company in, are you really reimagining that workflow? Because if you're just tagging on a light AI wrapper on your product, I think that goes back to the antithesis of, hey, you're just a light wrapper on GPT-4 or whatever model you've picked, that gets less defensible. If you're owning the entire workflow the way Figma did, right, and changed for product design, but using AI, this is where it gets very, very exciting. And I actually think there's a lot of companies that are modern, right, the companies that many of you in the room have founded, and are very well positioned to found these types of companies because you probably already own a lot of that workflow, right? You've built a company through blood, sweat, and tears, and now there's this disruption, but how do you harness that disruption and match it with your advantage of owning the workflow, whatever distribution advantage you've built, and really create something from sort of the rebirth of your company. We've seen that with a bunch in our own portfolio, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So Thomas talked about the technology and tools to build the business, right? Sarah talked about how to build a defensive mode and strategy to be differentiated. And as founders, I'm sure you care a lot about capital, right? Getting the funding to keep your business going. And so a question that I have for you, Asheem, is obviously Greylock looks at a ton of companies, right? What separates the ones that you invest in? Is it the founding team? Is it a particular business model? What do you look for when you're investing?
Yeah, so my starting part would probably be, I've been at Greylock now for 20 years. Years have gone by fast. The last year feels like it's AI by the minute, right? So, but I would say, if there's one thing I would say, I fundamentally believe in the people business. And if I just look over the years, right, extraordinary people have made extraordinary things happen. Generally, the best teams win. I mean, it sounds very simplistic to say that, but so that'd be one point. But then maybe just going a little bit more into AI specifically, right? It's a very interesting moment in time, right? Just given the activity level and number of new things that are going on. We think of the space at three levels. So we think of the foundation layer, then we think of the middle layer, AI infrastructure, enabling infrastructure. And on the top, we think of applications, right? AI-enabled applications. And I think if we sit here 10 years from now, a lot of money is going to be made in all these layers. A lot of money is going to be lost in all these layers as well, right? And I would say, just being on the VC side, it is very hard, right? Because we meet many companies every day, and it's very hard to discern. So what do we look for? I think number one, we look for people. The other piece is, I would say, we're doing things at the foundational level by extreme exception. We are in adept and inflection. We feel very fortunate to be in both those businesses. I think on AI enabling infrastructure, it's also challenging, right? Because I think as time marches by, one should expect, if you take Google Cloud, it's already world-class and amazing, right, in terms of AI enabling infrastructure. But by the hour, it's going to be better, right? So if you think of these companies that are out there, what is their edge yet? But I think yet there will be some businesses that will grow and will execute well. And then I think on AI-enabled apps, right, it comes down to what's your real advantage there, right? And I think what many people believe is if you have a data advantage or if you have a workflow advantage, right, those are things that maybe you can have some durability. I think one of the challenges there also is that there are large incumbent vendors, and today many of the incumbents are moving much faster than in the past, right? But I do believe, just on the app side, I think there's a lot of opportunity to take workflows, customer workflows, understand those workflows better than anybody else, and then over time, build some, build some durability, with a data advantage. So yeah, maybe I'll pause there.
Very, very valid points, Asheem. It feels like now we know the secret sauce. You're getting investment from Greylock. Ravi, I reserve a particularly contentious question for you because I know you're up to the task. We've talked a lot about the promises of AI and great startups, et cetera, right? There's another group of people who are saying that this is just a big bubble, right? The valuations are crazy, right? You got unicorns being created every month, right? This thing is not sustainable. It's all going to explode in spectacular fashion. Love to get your thoughts, right? Like, is this a bubble or is it not?
Thanks for that question. I think to be fair, I mean, Thomas, actually, all of us probably, the Gartner coined the enterprise sort of adoption cycle of technologies, and there's sort of a period of hype and optimism before anyone actually has to really make it work in the real world. And the next thing is called the trough of disillusionment. And I think I started in the investment business in technology, and what was it? 1994. So it's been a while, but I mean, I'm amazed that kind of pattern, it plays out almost every time, because I do think, and AI, at a fundamental level, I think it will rival this sort of seminal point where the internet became something that was used, globally in a way that it wasn't just sort of a government defense kind of infrastructure. It'll rival what happened with, mobile and the cloud. I mean, it is as profound as that. But with that, the human mind and the ability to imagine all the ways in which ultimately this is going to manifest, that happens instantly. And then, investors and capital flows. So we're certainly in a moment in time where I think, as Asheem said, a lot of money will be made ultimately, but a lot of money will ultimately be lost. And some of the money that's going to be lost is a function of money that's been put into the market in the past 6 to 8 months. So I think, what we'll see from here is, we've seen it already, actually. It's a bit of a slowdown in the kind of just aspirational, hopeful, large amounts of capital in startups with the promise of something in the future. And now we're going to get to a period where, for more money to flow into companies, we really have to start seeing where, I think as both Sarah and Asheem said, this idea of a new workflow, of kind of trained data, something that's pretty special and unique about how you would take AI and put it into a practical thing that a consumer or a business operator is going to use in a way where they just get a lot better at what it was they were doing. And it could be workflow, it could be that there's unique data insights, but we're going to start to see capital in this sort of trough of disillusionment. Is going to be like, hey, all this money went into the promise. What things are really working? What are new products that are fundamentally better? And we'll sort of hit that period, and I think it's a normal part of how technologies get absorbed into the market. And then at some point, as we start to see the companies that are building real businesses come out on the other side, I think the market will normalize. And from there, I do think there are going to be an enormous number of opportunities to build real companies with real products that are they allow different things to happen than the ways in which people use technology today. The one other point I would make, I guess, just not to make people fearful that we're sort of riding at this kind of peak point and all of a sudden we're going to go like this. I will say that we've been surprised with the ability of teams, whether it's thinking very concretely about a PRD that says, hey, if the workflow could include generative AI, I mean, in creativity for businesses around, whether it's images or videos or text copy, a way to be really concrete about, here's sort of a new workflow versus how the workflow exists today, and we're going to create some very functional way to use the generative aspect of AI to make the workflow better. We've seen that as a way that the products get really tangible really quickly, and I think it's been just interesting to us. The other piece that, again, I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but where very, like tangible ways that AI can kind of manifest as a product, we think that the kind of foundation models that will be companies like Google, if you can be in a position to leverage, because this takes an enormous amount of money to keep retraining and compute, it's really tough for a startup to be in a business where you've got to be in that part of the stack. However, the ability to train on the edge, and in enterprise, the ability the systems of record, the Oracle apps, Thomas, you were there, the SAPs, they're not going away. Those are the drive chains of the business. It's too expensive to rip them out. So companies that want to use generative AI in an enterprise context, they look for really clever ways to take it's maybe the foundation model that Google or someone else has developed, and then they integrate to these systems of record, and they take data exhaust from them, and to solve some, problem. Maybe it's, we're in a company called Navan, actually, with Andreessen Horowitz. It's they have an AI-enabled way that business employees can book their business travel, but you basically take data from travel reservation systems and you use it to enrich an underlying foundation model, and all of a sudden you've got a product where you've got an automated travel agent, and that is sort of a white-collar job that you can automate with AI without building your own foundation model. And it's so something to think about is, hey, maybe I don't have to be the world's best at just kind of generative AI model training, but how can I take some data that may exist in the enterprise, let me integrate to some systems, and then let me solve a problem that I can imagine generative AI can solve with this sort of special data that I use to that I train with, that makes the model just really smart at one specific task, in addition to the sort of general smarts it gets from a foundation model. And that's been I just say a recurrent pattern in some of the products that seem like they're getting substantial traction in the market now, before we hit this trough of disillusionment and come out the other side. So I think we're at zero.